Hey guys, it's Hale Obernolte from Pro Play Games. I'm here to give you guys a deck profile on the expanded Zoroark Garbodor deck that I used to get top 32 at this past weekend's Anaheim Regional Championships. Let's look at the list. So let's start by looking at the Pokemon of the deck. First off, we have the Bare Essentials, a 4/4 Zoroark GX line. We use the Paralyzing Gaze Zorua. I never once used Paralyzing Gaze during the entire tournament, but it's a more useful attack than anything else that any other Zorua offers, so it's the best. And of course, Zoroark GX is the core of the deck. Even in Standard, his trade ability is incredibly strong, being able to draw through your deck and really get as many options as you can during your turn. But of course, in Expanded, with Skyfield, he becomes his own powerhouse attacker to really round out the deck through consistency and a strong attacker. Alongside that, we have two Trubbish. We use one of the 70 HP Stomp Off Trubbish from Guardians Rising. It's kind of just a gimmicky attack, kind of same thing as Paralyzing Gaze. I never used it once the entire weekend. But Stomp Off kind of gives you a extra win condition, especially against the Control Zoroark decks that play the fossils that they can basically put back on top of their deck to have a one-card deck and not deck out. If they ever try to do that, you just throw up Trubbish, give it a Psychic Energy, and Stomp Off for the game. And of course, the 60 HP Trubbish, a little bit better because it has 1 retreat cost and the nice Garbage Collection attack to help you get some resources back. But the 60 HP can really be a downside in a lot of cases, especially against Trevenant, because they only need to do 2 Silent Fears to knock out that Trubbish, or against Archie's Blastoise, because their Articunos only need 1 heads on their attack to knock it out for 2 prizes. Along with that, other core of the deck, we have our Garbodor line. We play 2 Garbotoxin Garbodors. One of the biggest powerful effects of this deck is being able to shut off abilities, especially when you do it for only your opponents and not for yourself. A lot of decks in Expanded are really dependent on their abilities, and so shutting them off with Garbotoxin is incredibly powerful. We also play 1 Trashlanch Garbodor. It's not really as much of a core concept of the deck as it used to be in Zoroark Garbodor. Really, it's just there to have an extra powerhouse attacker that you can throw up late game to one-shot stuff you might not have the resources to do so with Zoroark anymore. Then kind of going along with our supporter Pokemon, we have Ditto Prism Star. Kind of self-explanatory, just a great card. You'd play it in the deck probably even just as a 5th Zorua, even if you didn't have Garbodor. But because you do have Garbodor, it gives you the flexibility of being able to evolve into either, which is really powerful. When your first turn, hopefully you're playing Bridget, getting down some basic Pokemon. Ditto is great because it can serve as either. So usually you'll grab a Zorua, a Trubbish, and a Ditto. And that way your opponent can't kill off your only Trubbish and give you no way to evolve into Garbodor, because Ditto can still do that. Or if they target down your Zorua, Ditto can evolve into Zoroark instead. So it really gives you the flexibility and stops your opponent from being able to target down one of your lines. We also play 1 Resource Management Oranguru. I actually never ended up using Oranguru once the entire tournament, but I'm glad that he was there. In a lot of matchups, being able to play it a bit slow and Resource Management back into your deck is really strong, and it's really helpful in a lot of the more grindy control matchups. Other than that, of course, we play 2 Execute. Very strong and expanded Zoroark. Lets you basically trade for free every turn that you don't want to discard anything, and also it helps you get basic Pokemon back into your hand to bench with Skyfield to reach big one-shots. One of the most amazing things about this deck is because we don't have to trade away anything we don't want with Zoroark or Ultra Ball or Dowsing Meteor or anything like that. Because of Execute, we're really able to conserve all of our resources until the late game. It's really not uncommon for this deck to reach the last few turns of the game and still have 3 or 4 VS Seeker, all of its energy, really all these strong resources you want in late game still in the deck, because you never have to discard them when you don't want to. We also play 1 Klefki, just for its Wonderlock ability, just a Pokemon that can attach itself onto Garbotoxin to shut off abilities. One of the strong things about this deck is through Klefki and Bursting Bloom, which are tools that discard themselves when it comes back to your turn, you're able to pseudo-hex your opponent by shutting off abilities for their turn but not for yours. So you still have the ability of trading 4 times in a turn, drawing 9 cards total, still have your abilities, and then you can shut off the abilities for opponent and not give them the same option, which is incredibly powerful. Then of course we play 3 Tapu Lele GX to be able to search out all of our supporters we want. Notably, the one you really want to search out with this is Bridget early on, but it's always powerful to be able to search out the support you want to play for a turn. And we also play 1 Shaman EX to help us draw through our deck with setup. A lot of lists I've seen play 2 Tapu Lele and 2 Shaman. I think it's more of just a preference thing. I'm a lot bigger fan of Tapu Lele and being able to always search out the Bridget when I want to turn 1. Not a big fan of Shaman, both because sometimes I feel like I don't get benefit out of it, and also it ends up being a 2-price liability on the bench. So I personally went heavier into Tapu Lele, but I think that's kind of a personal preference call. Maybe the most interesting question or thing to talk about the Pokemon here is actually what's not present. You might notice that we did not play any Sudowoodo or Mind Jack Zoroark for the mirror matchup. Finn and I were testing, and we wanted to put in one slot for the mirror matchup, and so we were thinking, okay, which is better, Sudowoodo or Mind Jack? So we played a mirror match where one of us had Sudowoodo and one of us had Mind Jack to figure out which made a bigger impact. We kind of found that neither actually made enough of an impact to justify a slot in the deck. Kind of just felt like the matchup just came still down to who ends up shutting the other out with Garbotoxin, and neither of those really do anything to affect that. So that's the Pokemon. Let's go ahead and look at the items now. Of course, we have our 3 Skyfield stadiums, which will allow you to have 8 Pokemon on your bench. This brings Zoroark's base damage cap up from 120 all the way up to 180, which goes up to 210 with Choice Band. So instead of just being a good fast attacker that can take 2 shots or 1 shots on smaller Pokemon, with Skyfield, Zoroark really becomes a powerhouse attacker that can 1-shot pretty much anything in the format. We also have 4 Ultra Balls, self-explanatory, consistency, search out the Pokemon you want. We have 3 Choice Band. Like I said, 210 is a really important number to hit, especially for the mirror matchup, so having 3 Choice Band helps you reach that. And this is one of the divergences of our list compared to a lot of the others at Anaheim, is that we play 3 Choice Band as opposed to 2. Really, this is the card that made the biggest difference in the mirror for us, not only because you need the Choice Band to reach 1-shot on your opponent's Zoroark GX, but also because it's one extra tool that you can attach onto Garbotoxin to shut off your opponent's abilities on a crucial turn. 2 Battle Compressor. Pretty self-explanatory, helps you thin out your deck, gets your Executes in the discard pile to use Propagation to fuel your deck, and also, probably the most important thing is it gets your 1-up supporters into your discard pile, or even 3-up supporters like Colress, which really helps fuel your VS Seeker heavy supporter engine, because you're not just sitting there with awkward VS Seekers in your hand but no supporters in your discard pile, because you can get them right there with Battle Compressor. And we do play 2 red card, also an incredibly important part of the deck. What I think makes this deck so dominant as it expanded is because you can do insane stuff like Colress for 12 cards, get a giant hand, trade a few times, get an even bigger hand, red cards your opponent, put them down to 4 cards in hand, activate Garbotoxin, shut off their abilities, and then take a giant 1-shot on their main attacker. It's just a really, really oppressive combo that's really difficult for most decks to fight against. So having the red card kind of gives that extra option of disrupting your opponent's hand while also using a supporter of your own like Colress, Guzma, or Delinquent. We play 1 Super Rod. It helps you get some Pokemon from your discard pile back into your deck, and it also has the benefit of shuffling our basic Psychic back into the deck. Usually Super Rod's just used to shuffle some Pokemon back into the deck, but having the option to recycle the Psychic is nice. We also play 1 Rescue Stretcher. Really same thing as Super Rod, get some Pokemon back. Rescue Stretcher of course gives you the option of putting it into the hand, which is nice, especially early on if you lose a Zorua. We play 1 Float Stone, give our Pokemon a little bit mobility, and it's also a good tool to put on Garbodor to shut off abilities with Garbotoxin. 1 Field Blower to remove our opponent's tools. Second would have been really nice, especially with how popular Zoroark Garbodor ended up being for the tournament, but 1 felt fine for most matchups, so that's where we were at. 1 Pokemon Communication. The deck plays a really high number of Pokemon. In fact, it plays more Pokemon than it does items or supporters, or of course energy. So Pokemon Communication, usually you have a target to put back into your deck, so it kind of just serves as a 5th Ultra Ball of a good way of getting any Pokemon you want in any situation. 1 Bursting Balloon, like I said with Klefki, this functions really similar in a way that it shuts off abilities with Garbotoxin for your opponent's turn, but then gives you abilities back during your turn. One thing that's nice about Bursting Balloon as opposed to Klefki is it doesn't need to go on the bench first like Klefki does, so it's very good at shutting off Sudowoodo. Unfortunately, unlike Klefki, you can't Rescue Stretcher it or Super Rod for it, or search it out with your Ultra Balls. So we played a 1-1 split so that you could have consistent ways of searching out your stuff you need to shut off abilities while also having the ability to shut off Sudowoodo. And for our A-Spec, we played Dowsing Machine. Ever since the deck lost Puzzle of Time because of the ban, resources can become kind of tight, and it's kind of difficult to predict what resources might become tight. For example, in the mirror match, having Skyfield is never really a problem because both you and your opponent play plenty of them. But in other matchups, it could be a Skyfield. So instead of playing a 4th copy of Skyfield and then having certain matchups where it might be useless, Dowsing Machine lets you just get back any resources you want. The deck draws enough cards between Colress and Zoroark that you don't necessarily need computer search out what you need, so having the ability to get back some of your resources is, in my opinion, a lot stronger for the deck. For supporters, we have a very thin line. We have 3 Colress, which is, in my opinion, one of the most insane cards in Expanded, especially in a deck like Zoroark where you want to have 8 Pokemon on your bench. It's not uncommon for Colress to draw significantly more than 10 cards. Especially in Zoroark mirrors, I had a significant number of times throughout the weekend where I would Colress for 16 cards in my hand, and that is just absolutely ridiculous. We play 1N. It functions as an early draw supporter, which is nice, especially if we don't get off the turn 1 Bridget, so Colress isn't drawing many cards. But more importantly, it's a great disruption supporter to disrupt our opponent's hand late game, sometimes even stronger than red card can if we're putting down to 1 or 2. And as always, the combo of N plus Garbotoxin and taking a knockout is just incredibly impressive. 1 Bridget, like I said, this is your supporter of choice early on. You really need to get down as many of your basics as you can. This deck has a ton of them and you want all of them out. So Bridget helps you search out a couple of them early on and get them down. 1 Guzma, pretty self-explanatory, bring stuff up and kill it. 1 Delinquent. This is actually one of the coolest things about this deck is, in addition to the really strong, fast combo of Zoroark and Garbodor, you also kind of have the slower option of spamming red card Delinquent with Oranguru, which I think really takes this deck to the next level. In some matchups that otherwise might be really difficult, like Sylveon or Wailord, or sometimes even Groudon, what you can actually do is just send up an Oranguru and just continuously red card Delinquent your opponent. And for decks like Sylveon or Wailord, that is incredibly difficult for them to deal with. Not only do they not have many ways of actively stopping that and being aggressive, they just don't function really well with a low card hand. And eventually they're going to get to a point where you just catch them out and they don't have much. And from there you can just kind of take the game. Against Sylveon, this gets rid of their resources way faster than they get rid of yours, especially when you're putting stuff back in with Oranguru. So it turns what might be an auto loss into an auto win, which is amazing. Play 1 Pokemon Ranger. Its inclusions there almost 100% just for Seismitoad. I ended up not playing this card at all the entire weekend because I didn't play against any Seismitoad. But as we saw, Jimmy Pendarvis ended up winning the tournament with Seismitoad. So I'm glad that I put it in, even though I didn't end up playing the match against the matchup that it was there for. And we have 4 VS Seeker. Incredibly powerful card in Expanded, and because we play Battle Compressor, we can get the supporters that we want into our discard pile early, so we don't end up with VS Seekers in our hand doing nothing. And finally, for energy, very straightforward because we're Zoroark. Of course, we play 4 double colorless energy, fuel Zoroark's attacks. It's wonderful. We also play 1 psychic energy. Playing the 1 psychic gives us the option to play Trash Lance Garbodor, which is a very powerful option, like I mentioned. Also can be used for Oranguru, which is great. And also it gives you an option of an attacker that's not dependent on your DCEs, which is important now that Faba exists, because it is possible for your opponent to remove all of your special energy game with Faba. With this 1 psychic, you can still throw that on a Trash Lance, send it up, and take a last knockout to close out the game.
So that's the list that I played for Anaheim. Obviously, it got me a pretty good finish, top 32. I'm happy with it. I still think the deck is looking wonderful heading forward to the Dallas Regional Championships next month. Whenever you have a deck that can take large knockouts with Zoroark GX, is incredibly consistent because of trade and Colress, drawing insane amounts of cards every turn, and disrupts your opponent between Red Card Delinquent and Garbotoxin, you're bound to have a really powerful combo, and I really think this is the baseline strongest deck in Expanded against a blank meta that you might not know what you're playing against. That's not to say that the deck doesn't have its bad matchups. I'm not saying it's a perfect deck either. One thing that I personally have been having some issues with the deck is it's kind of dependent on getting your setup early on. In games where you don't find the turn 1 Bridget to start your setup, you really end up having a really rough time. And that's what my 2 losses day 2 ended up being too. We're just not having good starts, having awkward hands where I can't really get going. You kind of get run over by your opponent. That being said, it is incredibly powerful. It can handle almost anything that you sit across from. And I think it's really looking good. Looking forward to Dallas. So I'm Hale Obernolte for Pro Play Games. Thanks for watching.